Franklin Delano Roosevelt's plane, the sacred cow, was on display in the Roosevelt in the fourth gallery of the museum. This case is dedicated to Merrill Ross of Topeka, a member of the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II. Also on display here are artifacts from the Buffalo Soldiers. Spy trawler, debris from a bombed-out Saddam Hussein palace in Iraq, the USS Topeka, and the Civil War Navy. Moving on around is a case filled with space artifacts and objects, plus 2 cases featuring wartime dioramas. We thank you for taking your time to visit our museum. Each display is signed and explains. About 30 years ago, the museum is divided into 5 galleries. The first gallery is the Winston Spencer Churchill Room. This room is devoted to England during the World War II years. This is where the tour will begin. The second gallery is the Ronald Wilson Reagan Gallery and deals with the United States Navy, a World War II parlor, a road sign, and a code talker exhibit. The fifth gallery is the Harry S. Truman Gallery with Hollywood Goes to War, the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit, a case on space object, as well as other dioramas. Now let's begin the tour. As we begin in the Churchill Room, please move to the case in the far left corner of the room. You'll see several Rockfish Matilda tank coming out of a railroad tunnel. The story goes like this. The tank you see was a part of the British Expeditionary Force sent to France. The tank was attacked by a German Luftwaffe Stuka bomber, and the tank sought safety in a rail. The tank in the tunnel, and it took 3 days to dig it out. Once the British crew reached freedom, they were now behind the German lines. The tank's crew came across a German gasoline and ammunition storage facility and destroyed it. If the story is true, that single act played a part in allowing the British Expeditionary Force to escape back to England. Also in this room, noted in the next case on the same wall, the model of the V-2 and V-1 German rockets. The V stands for vengeance. What they did to London can be seen in the Blitz diorama to the far right in the same case by Churchill. To the right is a painting of A Bridge Too Far, the ill-fated Operation Market Garden. In the round case are artifacts from the British Guards toy store across from St. James's Park in London, and the case at the front door tells the history of aviation and the flights of Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh. Now let's move to the Ronald Reagan Gallery artifacts. In this case, you will see a diorama of a small aircraft, the Storch. English translation is the Stork. It was sent by Hitler to save his friend Benito Mussolini, who had been kidnapped by the Italian communists. You can see Mussolini crawling to the airplane with a general sent to rescue him and the pilot who is already in the aircraft. The plane is on base. Directly in front of this case is the Cold War case. It features United States and Russian aircraft used during this case as a model of the RB-47 reconnaissance bomber from Forbes Air Force Base in Topeka that was shot out of the sky by the Russians in 1960. 4 crewmen were killed, including Major Palm, the aircraft commander. Note the refueling sheet signed by Major Palm. This was the final fuel document before the aircraft left for TDY in England. This is a model of the U-2 that was shot down with pilot Gary Powell during the first years of the Second Gulf War. Please take time to look at the 2 Navy cases at the front. On the top shelf is the present Air Force One aircraft, the Boeing 747. Below it, with the tail number 26,000, is the Air Force One aircraft used by President John the aircraft. It was this plane that returned President Kennedy's body back to Washington from Dallas. Also in this case is President Eisenhower's aircraft, the Column. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's plane, the Sacred Cow, was on display in the Roosevelt Room, the 4th gallery of the museum. President Harry S. Truman's aircraft, the Independent. Just to the right of this case is a picture of Air Force One taking off from Topeka, with the Capitol building in the background. On board is President Reagan, as he was the first president to fly in the new Air Force One. The president came to Topeka, Landon, a happy 100th birthday, and left in the aircraft you see in this picture. Please note the case on the wall next to the fire door. This case has 2 levels of artifacts. The top portion is devoted to the 190th Air Refueling Wing at Forbes Field, Topeka. The bottom is a tribute to President Ronald Reagan.
He broke the world speed record.
An excerpt from his Berlin Wall speech and an actual piece of the Berlin Wall. Other exhibits in this room include is following today's tour. If you're just joining the tour, please move to the third gallery and the tour will continue in just a few minutes. Welcome to the left is a large plaque. This was given to Deacon Mr. Harry Connery by the American Legion when he was the national commander of the Legion. It was also awarded for Mr. Connery's authorship of the Serviceman's Readjustment. Other exhibits to enjoy in this room include a rotary wing case, a modern warlord's chandler of Pratt, Kansas. One day, about 20 years after, he stated that he knew he was a goner.
He found another radio.
Then he said a P-38 fighter plane came out of the clouds and blew the two Japanese Zeros out of the sky. The man telling the story said, "I sure would like to shake hands with that pilot." George Chandler extended his hand to the storyteller because he was the pilot of that P-38 and those two Zeros. Let's now move to the fourth gallery in the museum, the Franklin Roosevelt room. In this room, as we enter, please move to the right and you will see the Native American Code Talkers exhibit. Members in the South Pacific during World War II. Code Talkers were all members of the United States Marine Corps. The code was never broken by the Japanese. On the island of Iwo Jima, they sent over 500 messages without an error. Radios in this exhibit are the authentic radios used by the Code Talkers, a museum object. This display features a small homemade icebox. Topeka surgeon Dr. Henry Blake was a battlefield surgeon during the worst of the fighting on the South Pacific island of Guadalcanal. He was pulled off the island because of infectious hepatitis and malaria. He wanted to return, but instead he was put in charge of a blood donor program. He realized that if whole blood could be shipped to the Pacific, that many lives could be saved. The diorama in the front of this case depicts a landing on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1940. It was a success, and Allied forces moved across Europe and into Nazi Germany to end this war. To the left is a World War II parlor. Note the food ration coupons on the radio, the 1940 Yank and Life World War II magazines, the gas tokens, the pack of Chesterfield cigarettes, and other items of the time. Compare the Underwood typewriter to your computer keyboard of today. Just in front of the typewriter is a B-4 bag used by the military in World War II. The next case on the right features dioramas of Jimmy Doolittle's Raid on Tokyo, as well as other wartime dioramas, including several Civil War battles. It was featured in the movie and television version of MASH. In the glass case behind the road sign, you can see Navy Air, military vehicles, and a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. The history of the flag is explained by a sign on the wall. The case displaying Roosevelt items, plus a letter from Albert Einstein to President Roosevelt, is also on the wall above this case. Throughout the world as a memorial to the soldier who will not be coming home from the war. There's a diorama on the long-range desert route which features British SAS troops attacking German airfields in North Africa during World War II. From Oahu and the Hawaiian Island chain. These artifacts depict the surprise attack on Hickory Field by the Japanese on December 7, 1941, and is titled "The Other Pearl Harbor." The Army Air Corps field was also dealt a terrible blow by attacking Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the African Queen, Farewell to Arms, and the bridges at Toko Reef. Plus several other.
And about here, you get feeling sorry for Mrs. Holley.
This is pretty good size in here.
Artifacts from the Buffalo Soldiers. Moving on around is a case filled with space artifacts and objects, plus two cases featuring wartime dioramas.
There it is.
For taking your time to visit our museum, military forces. God bless America. 5 galleries. The first gallery is the Winston Spencer Churchill Room. This room was devoted to England during the World War II years. This is where the tour. This room also has an Air Force One display in operation.
Oh, I've seen those before.
The third gallery is Dwight David Eisenhower Room and features many different military artifacts, including the attack on Pearl Harbor, World War II parlor, a road sign, and a code talker exhibit. The fifth gallery is the Harry S. Truman Gallery with Hollywood Goes to War, the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit, the case on space object, as well as other dioramas. Now let's begin the tour. As we begin in the Churchill Room, please move to the case in the far left corner of the room. QC was a part of the British Expeditionary Force sent to France to help stem the German attack. The tank was attacked by a German Luftwaffe Stuka bomber, and the tank sought safety in a railroad tunnel. The bombs from the airplane trapped the tank in the tunnel, and it took 3 days to dig it out. Once the British crew reached freedom, they were now behind the German lines. The tank's crew came across a German gasoline and ammunition storage facility and destroyed it. The story is true. That single act played a part in allowing the British Expeditionary Force to escape back to England from Dunkirk. V-2 and V-1 German rockets. The V stands for vengeance. Results of what they did seen in the Blitz diorama to the far right in the same case. British military aircraft are featured in the case under Churchill's picture. Above and to the left is a painting by Churchill. To the right is a painting of A Bridge Too Far, the ill-fated Operation Market Garden. In the round case are artifacts from the British Guards toy store across from. Now let's move to the Ronald Reagan Gallery, the second room in the museum. The immediate left is a case with World War.
I have two posters kind of like this.
It was sent by Hitler to save his friend Benito Mussolini, who had been kidnapped by the Italians of the case. Directly in front of this case is the Cold War case. It features United States and Russian aircraft used during the Cold War, as well as other artifacts from that period. In this case is a model of the RB-47 reconnaissance bomber from Forbes Air Force Base in Topeka that was shot out of the sky by the Russians in 1960. 4 crewmen were killed, including Major Palm, the aircraft commander. Note the refueling sheet signed by Major Palm. This was
I've seen a couple of these on the way here. We've seen a whole, bunch of those. What?
Fort Riley.
Yeah.
Please take time to look at the 2 Navy cases at the far end of the room, and we'll resume the tour at the 6-sided Air Force One case in a few moments.
I've seen that one before. It was at a different museum. This is the one that dropped the atomic bomb.
If you're just entering the museum, please join us in the Reagan Gallery in the second room. In the 6-sided case in the corner are Air Force One aircraft.
There's B-38.
And you know, if I don't go, well, thank you very much. We'll come back to see you.
I have a whole book about these. Really cool. Then we have this picture, really famous. And we have the hat. That's pretty cool. I love this. We were supposed to see this at the air show, but it wasn't here. This is the first stealth bomber. And we have the tiny Brewster Buffalo. Those things look funny. And there we have the Mustang. If you remember the video I had a while ago, they had the Mustang and the B-17 there. And we have both the ones we saw right here and right here. And this is what a bomber pilot would look like. This person created helicopters.
Major Forbes was killed in the crash of the YD-49, the Flying Wing, during a test flight at Muroc Dry Lake Bed in California. This Air Force crash was the only crash in Air Force history where 2 air bases were named as a result. Forbes Air Force Base Topeka pilot that day.
That would be scary.
On the case next to the entrance in the Eisenhower Gallery is a tribute. Other exhibits in this room include a Civil War case and a British aircraft case. Also to be found in this room. Into the third gallery, information about this diorama is presented on the wall. The next exhibit features a set of artifacts honoring Major General Monty Parrish. Included are his riding boots, his uniform tunic, and an array of medals.
I had a guinea pig named after that plane.
The medal on the bottom right is the Croix de Guerre,
Wait.
given to General Parrish by General Charles de Gaulle in person. Also note the picture of the general with General Eisenhower taken in 19 Mr. Harry Conway by the American Legion when he was the national commander of the Legion.
Actually,
It's also awarded for
that's
Mr.
not a
Conway's
vowel.
authorship of the Serviceman
That's a vowel,
Readjustment Act,
I think.
better known as the GI Bill of Rights. This artifact is on loan from the Kansas American Legion. Other exhibits to enjoy in this room include a rotary wing case, a modern warbirds display, and a World War II case for the next museum.
There's the Arizona.
Please note the original painting was Major George Chandler of Pratt, Kansas. One day, about 20 years after the end of World War II, Mr. Chandler stopped by his club on his way telling a war story.
There it
The
is
man
now.
stated that he was on a ship at Bougainville Island and two Japanese Zeros started. Let's now move to the fourth gallery in the museum, the Franklin Roosevelt room. In this room, as we enter, please move to the right and you will see the Native American Code Talkers exhibit. Members of the Navajo Indian tribe spoke their own native language as a code for war instructions in the South Pacific during World War II. The Code Talkers were all members of the United States Marine Corps. Their code was never broken by the Japanese. On the island of Iwo Jima, they sent over 500 messages without an error. The radios in this exhibit are the authentic radios used by the Code Talkers. Most are gone now, but they provided a great service to their country during a time of war. To the right behind the glass, we tell another unique story about a museum object. This display features a small homemade icebox. The Topeka surgeon, Dr. Henry Blake, was a battlefield surgeon during the worst of the fighting on the South Pacific island of Guadalcanal. He wanted to return, but instead he was put in charge of a blood donor program. He realized that if whole blood could be shipped to the Pacific, that many lives could be saved. He went to his basement and built the icebox you see in this display. The Navy improved on the design and many lives were saved because of Dr. Blake's idea. The diorama in the front of this case depicts a landing on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. Note the German defenders and the barbed wire. The Allies' landing was a success, and Allied forces moved across Europe and into Nazi Germany to end this war. To the left is a World War II parlor. Note the food ration coupons. Just in front of the typewriter is a B-4 bag used by the military in World War II. The next case on the right features dioramas of Jimmy Doodle's Raid on Tokyo, as well as other wartime dioramas, including several Civil War battles. In the middle of this room, you can't help but notice a rather large road sign. These types of signs were found in many war camps in World War II and Korea. This kind of sign was featured in the movie and television version of MASH. In the glass case behind the road sign, you can see Navy air, military vehicles, and a Don't Tread on Me flag. The history of the flag is explained by a sign on the wall. The case displaying Roosevelt items plus a letter from Albert Einstein to President Roosevelt is also on the wall above this case. Moving into the fifth and final gallery in the museum, you're entering the Harry S. Truman Room. Known as the man from Missouri, President Truman took office after the death of President Roosevelt. Note the Truman items in the square case on your left. The sign, "The buck stops here," was a sign the president kept on his desk in the Oval Office of the White House. Also to your left, behind the glass wall, you'll see a Vietnam memorial table set. This type of setting can be found in many dining rooms on military bases throughout the world as a memorial to the soldier who will not be coming home from the war or their attacks. There's also a major diorama depicting the raid on the Orange River Bridge during the night of June 5 and 6 before the landings of D-Day. The bridge is now called the Pegasus Bridge for the 6th British Airborne emblem of the Pegasus horse. The British were told to attack, secure, and hold the bridge until British soldiers landing on Juno Beach moved forward to the bridge and relieve the airborne soldiers. The next case moves us into the Pacific island of Oahu in the Hawaiian Islands, and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the African Queen, the Farewell to Arms, and the bridges at Toko Reef, plus several other war movie connections. Moving along, the next case honors the Tuskegee Airmen, backs from the Buffalo Soldiers. The Civil War Navy. Moving on around is a case filled with